to our monthly meeting. Let me just get everyone entered in here. Perfect. Hello, everyone. Just going to spend a couple minutes getting everybody into the group. You can go ahead and say hi to each other. Amazing.
Hi.
Hello.
Hello. Galaxy 2018 Maria.
Hi, Maria.
I can't be on video right now, but I'm happy to listen.
No worries. The only one that might feel required is me, so I'll stay on video. You can just do it if you feel called. No worries.
Yeah.
All right. Hi, Amelia, Shauna. Hi, everyone. Feel free to unmute yourself and just say hello. I'm going to spend just a couple minutes doing some housekeeping here, getting everybody into the group. And if you're really loud, you can mute yourself. All right, let me see here. All right, so there's 17 people in. I first want to say welcome, everyone. If I don't know you, my name is Dr. Laura Foster, but I affectionately go by Laura, of course, and I'm known online as Soul Inspired Girl. If you have not been in these meetings before, I meet here every month, and we've had between 40 and 60 women on here every single month, just really discussing whatever's coming up for us in our heart and in the world right now. As you can tell, I'm going back and forth here. If you would like to go ahead and actually, I'm going to just mute everybody. It just makes for a little bit easier. Now, it doesn't mean you can't unmute yourself and talk, but it just, when we have this many people on our call, it makes it a little bit difficult to be able to hear. Sometimes there's some background noise and so on. So if you see me going back and forth with my hands in my face, it's just because I'm a one-man band over here and I'm kind of doing everything on my own, which I love to do, but that means I kind of have to get people into the room and make sure everybody is where they need to be. But I want to orient you to a couple things. I am hardwired to my Wi-Fi, which doesn't mean I won't have a problem, but it minimized my issue on my side. I have very good high-speed internet here. If I'm pixelating, if I'm not coming through on your end, try try going out, rebooting. If you can hardwire to your Wi-Fi, what a fabulous thing to do. That kind of helps with the minimizing of the Wi-Fi issues if you can go right into the modem. Close down any other sort of background things you have going on and tell your teenage kids to stop streaming in the basement. Those are the things that I know that work. If they don't work for you, hop out, hop back in. If you can't hear me or see me, that might be something on your end. Sometimes our microphone gets grabbed by some other program running in the background. And those are the things that I know help kind of get us going. So if you have any issues, and if you can't get on or you're having lots of problems, just take a deep breath and hop off. I want to let you know that I am planning on doing something which I have not done before in these, and I am open and ready to hear your idea on this. So I just want you to know there is a chat bar down below, and I do my best to stay attuned to that. So here's what I'm proposing. I am proposing that I can go ahead and record the portions of our time together where I am the one that's on the screen and the only one speaking. So what I've done on my end is I have taken off some of your viewpoints, so it will only be videoing me. When we go into breakout rooms for a couple minutes here and there during today's call, I will not be videoing that. I'm gonna go ahead and video and record this. If this is not something you're comfortable with and you don't want to say it right now, send me a message. I'm not going to send it out for at least 24 hours till I hear from everybody if they have an issue, okay? So no one's ever said that they have an issue with it. It's kind of me just trying to be aware of what seems right now. So I just want to make that kind of clear. Okay? All right. So I'm in my rental house. Bodhi and I, that's my dog, we're here for the next hour. It is my intention to make these monthly meetings only an hour long. I know sometimes some of the topics get thick and juicy and we start getting into them in some of the breakout rooms, and we want to be in there a little bit longer. So I will do my very best, but I understand and I do my best to honor your time. If you have to happen to have to hop off, I will not be offended. Okay? Thank you so much. I'm okay with it. Fabulous, right? And I just want you to know you can change your mind at any time, and just know that I am just figuring it out as we go forward, and I'm giving you that opportunity as well. All right, so what is this all about? What is this group? What is this thing that I'm doing? This is actually an extension of my private Facebook group, which is called Soul Inspired Girl. It is a place for women who want to have more conscious conversation, to want to speak more authentically, however awkward or natural that might feel for you. And it really stems from this idea that I really want to be having really interesting conversations with women. And I have been lucky enough, after practicing for 24 years as a chiropractor, that it has really occurred to me through those small conversations I had between some closed doors that I think a lot of other women do too. And I don't know why that's a sort of an aha moment for me somewhere along the way, but I figured why not create a space for it? So these free monthly meetings that we do here are really become an extension of that. And I will shift and change it as we go forward. So I always want you to, I'm encouraging you rather, to reach out to me in this forum or outside of this forum to let me know what resonates with you. Let me know what doesn't resonate with you. Give me some topics, some things that you want to hear about in our Facebook group or on here, and I will try and curate the things that most apt to interest the most people here. All right, so just to give you some background if you don't know me, like I said, 24 years in practice. I sold my practice in 2019, and this spring I made the unexpected decision to retire my chiropractic license. Was not expecting to do this. I primarily did this because as a regulated health professional, there is no distinction in the eyes of Regulated Health Professional Act between what you do personally and what you do professionally, online, on a stage, on Facebook, anywhere. And we are mandated to walk a very narrow line between what we can speak about publicly. And this was never an issue for me. But for the first time, it did. It became an issue for me, and I just really didn't feel comfortable with it. It's kind of like you don't know what you don't know till you know. And so in the spring, I really felt compelled to retire my license and dedicate 100% of my time to the things that I have been doing part-time for a number of years, like coaching women, creating and curating experiences where women can come together. One of my passions is travel, and I brought that together doing retreats, 1-day retreats, 7-day retreats, coming into 10-day retreats. Clearly, you can see this could be an issue going forward, but I do have 3 retreats coming up, one in November in Muskoka, one in February in Mexico, and then one next September 2021 in Spain. I'm hoping. So anyways, this also comes together with me being a yoga teacher. And the thing that I most try to do for myself is to try and align my life with the things that I'm passionate about, the things that are most authentically me, which is the reason why I'm now living in Kelowna. Earlier this spring, I moved back to what is my hometown. I haven't been here for at least 25 years, and that's where I'm living now. So this topic tonight, being brave with boundaries, is something that has never felt more relevant to me, to my clients, to my coaching clients, to my girlfriends, to my family. Recently, I launched my first round of a new series that I did called Reclaiming Your Voice. It was a 5-day series for women who want to speak their truth with more courage and confidence and conviction. 59 people, 59 women came through the course, and I'm relaunching it in a 21-day format that's beginning on August 10th. And the reason I say that is, yes, I think you could be interested if you're interested in this topic, but the reason I'm doing this webinar tonight is because this is the thing that seemed to come up over and over and over again: boundaries. So healthy boundaries are an absolutely essential component of any relationship, and especially the relationship that we have with ourselves. And although I've led a monthly webinar on this topic, not maybe 6 or 7 months ago, I didn't even bring my notes out. I left them where they were, and I started on a blank piece of paper. Actually, I started on 22 Post-it notes. If you could see where I'm working right now, it's ridiculous. But the reason why I didn't go back to anything I've said in the past is simply because I don't think it's relevant anymore. I feel like, yes, COVID is part of it, meaning if there was ever a time when clarity seemed to come rushing at us in the most uncomfortable way, it's now. If there was ever a time when boundaries came to the forefront, it's now. But also because I feel very deeply that this is the time of real feminine rising. I feel like there is a calling for women to step into their most authentic place of self, to be more solidly who you are, not just for yourselves, but especially for yourself, but also for our families and for humanity and whatnot. And I mean that when I say that. I know that sounds a little dramatic when you say, you know, we're being called to rise for humanity, but there's something inside my heart and my gut that says that's true. So here we are. So let me just get a little bit organized there. Can everybody just let me know? I saw something pop up in the background, but if for some reason you can't hear what I'm saying or you want me to repeat it, there's a bit of a lag on the chat bar, but please just let me know, okay? All right, so I'm just letting a couple more people into the group. Fantastic. So being brave with boundaries. I'm going to talk a lot about what boundaries are. I know that the concept of boundaries isn't sexy. Like when you say boundaries, I feel like that's such a negative connotation. The reason why I'm interested in boundaries is because it is a way to feel incredibly empowered. It is a way, when you have healthy boundaries, a way to build your self-esteem. It is a way to have a great sense of identity of who you are, and it is the way to self-honoring. And I know that is so much of what so many of us want more of, want to establish, want to strengthen. And I feel like we don't know what we don't know. And what I mean by that is, a lot of times we don't know that the concept or the issue that we're having is a boundary issue, right? So sometimes it shows up as this: we're just not feeling the way that we want to feel, or we're not feeling the way we want to feel in a particular relationship. And for whatever reason, and I get this because I have all sorts of conditioning and back history around boundaries, we just might not even realize that what we're actually lacking is the proper boundary, because the boundary is what will help create really bountiful, healthy, fulfilling relationships. So today, in this time that we have together, I want to orient you to all the ways that it shows up so that you have a good sense of when it happens in your life, you're like, this is a boundary thing. And then you're going to know what to do. So recognize when a healthier boundary needs to be set. I want to, of course, define what a boundary is and also define what a boundary isn't, and get clear on why this is the cornerstone to our own sense of self. And I can tell you, and you know this from a lot of the work that I've done in the past, if you worked with me, is that the relationship we have to self is the most significant relationship. It is the cornerstone. And I know we kind of can know that up here, but a lot of times, and I'm that person who, I was like a jet, I just like a cannon. I got shot out of my teenage years into my 20s, going after all the things that I needed to go after. And I started creating relationships with my sense in the work that I did in the world. I started looking for a partner to spend my life with. I started, doing all of these things outside of myself. And what I forgot to do, didn't realize that I needed to do, had no sense of it, was that I really needed to define the relationship with myself. I defaulted to the ways that I show up in the world and the relationships to other people and other things as being my primary focus, and I skipped over the relation to self. Thanks so much to the universe, through a series of experiences, it came full circle. You might know what I'm talking about for yourself. And what that meant is somewhere in my late 30s, my life came crashing down on me. Horribly uncomfortable, not awesome. So glad it happened. Served me well. So the relationship to ourselves is one of the most important. It is the most important relationship because that allows us to show up in the ways that we can and need to show up for all the people we love and care about around us. Okay, so I'm not going to leave you there. I want to really give you a good sense of how to approach the process of creating a better boundary. And I want to give you really specific examples of what that can look like so that you have a good sense of like, how would I go about saying that? Or how would I go about identifying that? And then I want to give you an opportunity to share amongst yourselves. Don't jump off the call when I say that. Nobody needs to say it. I'm also not going to be recording it. I'll put 3 or 4 women in each of the groups, and I'll give you a couple minutes to journal and then just kind of share real quickly. I think there's such value, such deep, deep value in allowing your thoughts and your feelings to go out into the world, even if you say it to one person, okay? And then I'm going to give you an invitation at the end and a bit of a bonus. Okay, sound good? All right, so let's start. Let me reorganize my Post-it notes. You're probably going to have a laugh with me and I'm never going to do this again. Okay, so here's a couple things that I want to be really mindful of. Number one is you may need to create a healthier boundary if the thing that you feel often is either resentment, anger, or burnout in any situation, okay? So if you feel like resentment is something that comes up, bubbles up for you a lot, if you feel like you're quick to anger, you feel incredibly burnt out, that is an indication that you possibly might need to set a healthier boundary, whether it's a boundary in a work relationship, with friends, with family, with extended family, or friends, or any of those things, okay? If you feel like you are that person that has way too many toxic relationships, I hear that a lot online, that people just feel like there's a lot of toxicity in the relationships around them. That's a good sign that you may need to set a healthier boundary. If you agree to keep the peace outside of yourself, but then you start the war within yourself. So if you find yourself shrinking, editing, showing up less than, so you can keep peace around you, there's a good sign that there's a boundary that we could work on. You are what other people need and want you to be, and not what you need yourself to be. Oh, I feel that one, right? So if you're showing up in a way that you believe other people need to have you or for you to show up, but you're doing it at the expense of yourself, that's a boundary issue. Perhaps you worry what other people think of you excessively, almost under that term, kind of like people pleaser. That might be an indication also that you need a healthier boundary. And if you feel responsible, excessively responsible for other people's emotions, that's a big one, okay? So these are the things that if you're noticing that comes up for me, and it's not that comes up for me now and again, that's a theme. Maybe a theme in your whole life, but it might just be a theme in a particular relationship or a particular circumstance. So these are the things that you're like, okay, I need to pay attention to this. If you feel guilty for gifting yourself what you need, that's a good sign that there's a boundary issue. If you feel disconnected from yourself and your needs, in other words, you don't have a good, strong sense of identity, that's another indicator. If you make way too many grand sacrifices at your own expense, that is a particular example where we're not honoring ourselves. And if that comes up consistently, that's a red flag. If you feel taken for granted and underappreciated in the relationship consistently, that's a red flag. And as a result, these are examples. They're not all the examples because there's lots of different ways boundaries or different kinds of boundaries can exist in our life. But if those are things that come up for you, I just want you to kind of just being like, yeah, no, that's not an issue, or yes, that's an issue in my life or in these particular relationships. So just make some notes as you go. So this is what happens when we consistently don't have good, strong, healthy boundaries, not too rigid, but healthy. This is where that sense of anger can show up, where this feeling exhausted because you're leaking energy all over the place. And you can excessively feel resentful. And if you are someone who has this a lot, what might happen for you is that you might end up finding yourself as being someone who has a tendency to be a bit passive aggressive. And the reason I say that is being passive aggressive is often our attempt to want to try and bring control back. So if you know this is a tendency, just kind of make a mental note for yourself. And I also think if you're the person that's going, is this it? Is this what life is? Is this what my life is? Is this what's going on? Chances are you're maybe not living very aligned. In other words, you're showing up outside of yourselves in ways that are not in alignment with who you are. Maybe you're showing up in a way that you think other people need you to show up. You have a story or a belief around that. All of those things have to do with boundaries, but we don't often recognize that they do. So the first conversation to have with ourselves is the one with ourselves, right? So it's noticing that we need to have the conversation with ourselves. That's the part where being able to tell ourselves the truth is just so important. This is where the self-honoring comes up. And then from there, once we've done that, then it's about creating change, okay? Just let me know if you're with me. Give me a big hands up or just write something in the chat bar. I just want to know if this is resonating with you, that I'm not just speaking to myself. All right, so let's get into what are boundaries. So I'm going to be sharing the video, and I'm terrible with sharing the screen, so I'm going to do my best here. But what are boundaries? Whenever I think about boundaries and I do workshops on boundaries, I always come back, thank you everyone, I always come back to Brené Brown. She is brilliant at this, and her definition of boundaries is probably the easiest. It simply is what's okay and what isn't. That's her definition of boundaries. A different definition of it is it's limit or space. It's when you create a limit or you have space between you and other person or other people designed to protect you and take good care of you. That's the intention of it. So there can be different kinds of boundaries. There can be physical boundaries around, there can be, yes, there are physical boundaries. They're called fences. That's not what I'm talking about. You can have boundaries with respect to your physical. You can have boundaries with respect to your mental and emotional well-being. You can, of course, have boundaries around material possessions, your time, your energy, your space. All of them are important, and we're going to talk about it. All, and I mean all relationships need boundaries, because this is what separates your physical space, your feelings, and your needs and responsibilities from others. And what they do so well is they tell others how they can treat you. That's really important. So boundaries are just something that give you a space so that you know where you end and the next person starts, okay? So if you're feeling like people are always treating you badly, yeah, it's not okay that people treat you badly. But the onus then becomes on you going forward to be able to create a clear, concise, defined boundary with consequences. And we'll talk about how to do that as you go forward to protect you, your feelings, your needs, that kind of thing. Okay, so this is the way that we tell other people what's okay and what isn't okay. Boundaries can be flexible. They also can change according to your needs. And I also say they change according to the season of life you're in, right? Like I remember, and this is kind of a weird one, but I'm sure you can probably relate, when babies are little, they are in your physical space all the time. And it's lovely, but did you ever feel like everyone just get off me, right? I don't feel that way. 51, nobody's climbing on my lap. Well, maybe my partner, but nobody else. And so therefore, we can have different boundaries at different times. At one end of the spectrum, boundaries can be really excessively rigid. And when they're excessively rigid, and this is a boundary issue too, because most people think of it as being either the problem about being non-existent or needing to be stronger. But I know that there are people in this group that feel very isolated and alone. And sometimes for whatever reason, their own life experience, whatever's happened, they've created such a rigid set of boundaries that it doesn't let people in. And it doesn't let you out in a way either. And then on the other side of it, that's where maybe they're non-existent. And this is where we start to see people like not feeling like they know who they are. There's that loss of identity. and you know, you start to feel enmeshed with other people, that's when you need to have it. So the right answer is according to whatever the relationship is. With some people and in some experiences, like work relationships and so on, you're going to want to slide the boundaries in one direction. And in other relationships and other experiences at certain times in your life, you're going to want to slide it in the other way. And what worked for you 4 years ago maybe needs to change now. And if there was anything that happened, I really think that COVID was one of the things that was kind of like, how's your boundaries? How's your boundaries now? Maybe you want to upgrade your boundaries. So as much as it's been horribly uncomfortable during COVID for all sorts of reasons, I think there's never been a better time than now to be able to really look at what our boundaries are and set up more appropriate boundaries for the place we're in. All right. Yep, that's true, Lisa, you and everybody else. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to unplug my video, my here, because, and just let me know if you can't hear me. I am going to just play what I think is just a brilliant clip from Brene Brown. You probably knew I was going there, on boundaries. And I just need you to let me know if somewhere along the bar in the chat room, if you can't hear it, okay? So I'm gonna go ahead and share my screen. Hold on, stay tuned. Okay, 1 second here. All right, so let me go ahead and start. It's about 5 minutes long. I think it's worth every second of it. And here we go.
One of the most shocking findings of my work was the idea that the most compassionate people I have interviewed over the last 13 years were also the absolutely most boundaried. Because
you got most boundary.
So I'll give you a great definition of the definition of boundary that I use in the book. Boundary is simply what's okay and what's not okay. What I think we do is we don't set boundaries. We let people do things that are not okay or get away with behaviors that are not okay. Then we're just resentful and hateful. Me, I'd rather be loving and generous and very straightforward with what's okay and what's not okay. And I did not, that I learned from the research. I was the exact opposite. I assumed for the first 35 years of my life that people were sucking on purpose just to piss me off. Mm-hmm. That's what I assumed. Yeah, right. Whether it was someone who worked for me or it was someone family member who was constantly like, I was always critical and judgy. And I was like, why are they choosing these things? Why are they making their choices? They should know better. And then when this thing came up from my therapist, what if people are doing the best they can? I thought my husband had the most beautiful answer to that question. He said, I'll never know whether people are doing the best they can or not. But when I assume people are, it makes my life better. So now I think I am not as sweet as I used to be, but I'm far more loving.
It's not just some like technique so that you can do that. That's really like a way of being to like nurture that soil of wholeheartedness.
Yeah. Generosity, to assume the best about people, is almost an inherently selfish act, because the life you change first is your own.
Love yourself.
Yeah. And so my question is big, B-I-G. Mm-hmm. What boundaries need to be in place for me to stay in my integrity and make the most generous assumptions about you? But generosity can't exist without boundaries. And we are not comfortable setting boundaries because we care more about what people will think, and we don't want to disappoint anyone. We want everyone to like us, and boundaries are not easy. But I think they're the key to self-love, and I think they're the key to treating others with loving kindness. Sustaining. Nothing is sustainable without boundaries. I think compassion and empathy are different things and again, I'm relying on my data for this. I think compassion is a deeply held belief that we're inextricably connected to each other by something rooted in love and goodness. I call that God. Not everybody calls that God. My dad would call it fishing.
Fishing?
Fishing?
Is it fishing?
No, there's no G in fishing. But I think compassion is a deeply held belief. I think empathy is the skill set to bring compassion alive. So empathy is something we can teach. I mean, it's something we've taught our kids since they were very little. It's about how to communicate that deep love for people in a way so that people don't know they're not alone. I think there's a lot of new and interesting information out there about empathy not being a good thing, about that, you know, there's an argument that says, you know, if Travis is in struggle and I practice empathy with you, I'm taking on your darkness, and it leads to burnout and it leads to, but empathy is not feeling for somebody. It's feeling with them. It's touching a place in me that knows where you've been. So I can look at you and say, me too, brother. You're not alone in this. And I find empathy to be infinite. I think it gives back tenfold what you put out.
It's sustaining. Like if
It's sustaining.
if you've done the work and you have your boundaries,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you could tread that water forever and never get tired.
Okay, so empathy. I'm quoting Travis here, empathy. If you've done your work and set your boundaries, you can tread that water forever.
Yeah.
Amen. It's not finite, and it keeps giving back to us. And so this idea that, but here we go back to where we started this conversation. Empathy minus boundaries is not empathy. Compassion minus boundaries is not genuine. Vulnerability without boundaries is not vulnerability. So you see that there's a huge riff here, which is boundaries are freaking important.
Right.
And it's not, they're not fake walls. They're not separation. Boundaries are not division. They're respect. There's here's what's okay for me and here's what's not.
All right, hold on here. I just need to. So maybe you can let me know. Was everyone able to hear that? Let me just pull up. All right, so I think that was fine for everybody. Yeah, and the reason why I wanted to show that video has mostly to do with the fact that, I don't know about you, but I was definitely feeling like I've been raised in a way that I didn't know there was such a thing as boundaries. So I think it's really important to kind of look at this idea of why is it that we might have boundaries or lack the right kind of boundaries for our life. And I often like to look back what I consider to be an origin. You know, if I look back to my own origin, I feel like this is something that we were taught and modeled to us. Perhaps our parents don't have good boundaries, but also as children, I think it's common to really discourage boundaries for children. So, you know, everything from like, hey, give Aunt Lorna a kiss, you know, it wasn't okay to have that sort of physical boundary, that boundary about your physical body. I know in my family, it was like when my dad or mom said like, come here now, there was no discussion about it. It was just like, put your stuff down and get over there. So there was no boundary setting for me. They had boundaries, meaning like I knew what was okay for me to do around them and what wasn't. And my parents weren't terrible or anything. That's not what I mean. When I really think back, I think about what was modeled to me. And also, you know, even things like it wasn't okay for me to have a toy or something that I owned that other people couldn't play with or use, right? So it was always this, you know, you share your toys, you share your stuff with other people. And as silly as that sounded, As silly as maybe that does sound, and maybe that's not what your experience was, but that's really what my experience was. And a lot of the kids that I knew that grew up in the 60s, is that I was really encouraged not to have boundaries. And I was rewarded for being good. So I was rewarded for being easy, don't rock the boat, going with the flow, not speaking up. And this is where you can see the part where I'm talking about, like in Reclaim Your Voice, this is where this stuff comes from, is we kind of get taught that, and then we get bounced around as we get older, and we find we don't have great boundaries, or something traumatic or something happens in our childhood, which means we have really excessively rigid boundaries. And we use those boundaries to create safety for ourselves, but then that continues with us as we get older. So I took some of this work. I am sharing some of this work that comes from a woman named Sharon Martin. Thank you, Joanne. And these were some of her shares, and I think they're brilliant. So I decided to just kind of work with them. Her name's Sharon Martin, and I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to email you later with the clip and some of these resources that I'm going to be sharing today. But it's really important to be really clear on why we have boundaries. Because as we go about the process of defining relationships that need healthier boundaries and going about the process of setting them, we need to know what our why is. I think this is just so vitally important about pretty much everything we do in life. When we have a strong sense of why we're doing something, we can go past the moment of discomfort and create it. So it's like short-term discomfort for long-term ease. You know, when you're kind of like, you put it in your back pocket and you put it in your back pocket and you put it in your back pocket, pretty soon you can't even walk forward because your back pockets are so full. It's like that. So it's understanding why you would have the uncomfortable conversation or set the boundary that might feel unnatural and awkward at the beginning, why you would do it. So these are some of the reasons. You'll know why you want to do it, but these are some of the reasons. Is the big reason, the overarching reason why boundaries are so important is they allow you to be your true self. And isn't that why we're frickin' here? I mean, isn't that it? You were given this soul, this unique soul, 7.7 billion people in the world or something like that, and not a single person is you. It's as unique as your fingerprint. And I know, and you should know if you don't already, that's so freaking important. What you offer the world is unique to you. And I know a lot of times we get separated from that and we think it's maybe not that important. It is important. You being your true self, your authentic self, having a delineation between you and other people allows you to be your true self. That's super, super important. And I don't know about you, but every day I endeavor to be more of who I am. That's it. Okay. Number 2, healthy boundaries are a huge form of self-care. Okay. So not feeling responsible for how others behave or feel is a big part, and it prevents you from overextending, right? So it's self-care because when you create a healthy boundary, you're not leaking energy everywhere, or you don't have a relationship that's taking up all your energy. So this is how you avoid the burnout or the resentment or feeling overextended rather. And it also, this is the way that you say yes to the things that you should be saying yes to and saying no to the things that we shouldn't be. And this is how we create the alignment. We don't have, space in our lives to create alignment when we don't have a boundary there. When we're handing out our energy left, right, and center for all the wrong things, then it's difficult for us to start to create an alignment in our own lives. The other thing is that healthy boundaries create safety, right? They create safety because from an emotional and physical perspective, it pushes back things that are uncomfortable or are hurtful behavior. So it's important. They also help you form realistic expectations. A healthy boundaries let you and others know what to expect. And I think this is actually probably, for me, this is my why. It gives you a greater sense of identity. When you don't have your own back, when you chronically, not once in a while, but chronically show up for others at the expense of yourself, and you know what I'm talking about because we've all done it or do it a little bit or a lot, we lose our sense of self, right? And we teach ourselves that we don't have our own back. So when you don't have your own back, your sense of your own self-esteem and your own self-worth starts to go down, even though we don't realize. Incremental small changes with time. So when you flip that around and you start to create a healthy boundary, you're telling yourself you're counting on you. And when you start showing up in your life that you're counting on you, other people are going to see it as well. So it tells people what to expect, which also means that when you say yes to something, you're all in. You're all in. All your cellular DNA is in. But when you chronically say yes to things that you want to say no to or are not aligned with who you are, we're not all in. Okay? So that's the thing that just sort of like you don't really necessarily feel that, but that is one of the biggest things that happens is you get a greater sense of your own self-identity. So just give me a heck yes, or that makes no sense to me if, as we're going along. All right. So here's where I want to go with this, is I want to spend the next, I'm going to say maybe just 3 or 4 minutes right now, just to reflect. If you have a journal, which I'm sorry I forgot to mention at the beginning, but it's kind of important to have a piece of paper. I want to take a couple minutes to just do a little bit of work right now, because it's one thing to listen to information, but it's another thing to take it in and kind of apply it in the moment. So I'm going to give you some space and time to be able to journal this. And my question is, how does this show up in your life? Do you feel like there are relationships in your life where you could set a healthier boundary? Do you feel like you need to shift a boundary that was once okay and now it's not? Do you feel like maybe some of your boundaries are too tight, too rigid, and it's really preventing you from living the life that you want to be living? Do you need to set a boundary around your material possessions? And I'm going to tell you right now, that's actually a big thing for women. You know, I see women in my practice a lot of time where they come in with their purse and then their kids just go rifling through their purse. And my own sense of boundaries kind of like pops up. Now, that woman actually might be perfectly okay with people going through her purse. But my thing for me, because this is about, I'm putting it through my filter, not theirs. I'm looking at that and going, like, why are you going through her purse? So that for me, it's like, I have a strong boundary around things like that. Something that's my purse that has everything from my lipstick to my tampons and my cell phone in it, like, get out of my purse. That's how I feel about it. So when you have something that's a material thing, and you feel like people just tromp over that, or someone tromps over it, or maybe sometimes it's your kids, I don't want you to minimize that, because I think it's important. Because every time we ignore a boundary that could be set in a way that's more in alignment with you, you leak energy for all the wrong things. So just take a moment to reflect on the material possessions you have, reflect on your time, hold on a sec.
Quarter after. They're going to take 10 minutes, then they're going to close it up. Is that okay?
There you go. Emotional relationships, and of course your time and your physical body. Okay, so let's go ahead and I'm going to give you a few minutes to just get a few starting thoughts down, and then we'll go ahead and I'm going to break you out into rooms. And I don't want you to feel stressed about this. I just want us to give an opportunity to kind of share what's coming up for us around boundaries. If this is something you've been working on, if this is something you haven't really thought about, if you've become really clear that there are places in your life that you want to be setting better boundaries. And then when we come back from this, we're going to go ahead. I understand if you got to go. Then we're going to get down to the last part, which is I'm going to walk you through how to set a boundary and give you some examples. Okay? All right. So I'm going to set it for, I'm just going to give you like 3 or 4 minutes. And then I'll go ahead and put you in rooms. Hi, Heather. There's a few people I haven't had a chance to say hello to. Carolyn, so nice to have you. As always, Erica, Diana, Christy. All right, so a few more people back in. I think that's it for now. Okay, so just go in the chat bar and just let me know, how was that? You know, were you able to get a couple, you know, kind of your initial thoughts out on this? I know we could do a lot more work. That's where retreats come in. But yeah, I just want us to give an opportunity to be able to say a few things. I want to get into the how to set a boundary, because I feel like this is not something that we went into last time that we talked about boundaries. And I think it's really important, because it's one thing to identify that you need to set, thank you, Carolyn, perfect. I know that we get into this point where we realize we need to set a boundary, or a healthier boundary, shall I say, but then we get to the point where we're not sure how to do it. So this is a couple of things I'm going to say about this. Number one, obviously, you need to start at the point where you're identifying that it isn't working. And what does that even really mean when I say to identify it isn't working? And this may be in one particular relationship. This could be across the board. So let's take it down to one particular relationship. Having a sense of when something isn't working. And the only way that we really get to do that is if we take a moment to check in with ourselves. As silly as that sounds, a lot of time we're kind of buzzing through life, which is, I think, where COVID-19 hit us maybe in the gut, is that for some of us, not everyone, but for some of us, our life slowed down a lot. And so we had this mandated pause, and all of a sudden we were checking in with things that maybe we just sped right by. So the important part is to give yourself the opportunity to check in and tell yourself the truth around something. So even if you're not sure what to do in a particular circumstance, at least start by being really clear with yourself that a relationship doesn't feel the way you need it to feel, whether that's a relationship with your work, a relationship with your intimate partner, might even be a relationship with a family member, something that is saying that it doesn't feel good. And the question to ask yourself when you have this sort of feeling within yourself is, I'm not loving how this is feeling, or I'm not liking what just happened there, is, what am I feeling? Funny, but that's it. Ask yourself in your mind's eye, what am I feeling? Try and identify to yourself exactly what you're feeling. Second question is, why am I feeling this? And it sounds funny, but if you were talking to someone else, those are the very questions that you would say. You're like, what are you feeling? Why are you feeling it this way? But for some reason, we don't often ask ourselves those same questions. So just pausing for a moment when you feel that something isn't right, or it's off, or it doesn't feel good, why am I feeling this? And look for signs of discomfort, resentment, stress even, anger, guilt. When you start to feel those emotions, those are kind of signs for you that you're like, okay, I'm just going to take a moment in my mind's eye. I'm going to ask myself what's going on, try to identify it by checking in and not checking out, and asking yourself, what am I feeling and why am I feeling it? And this is the part where we said, be clear with yourself. Honor yourself enough to tell yourself the truth. I will give a situational example, exactly. Just one moment, Lisa. And remember why you are setting a healthier boundary. So the reason I said this is what I said before, which is remember why you're setting, remember why, what is your why? Poof, that was a sentence. Remember what is your why? Because in the moment when it's uncomfortable, it's a natural default to want to feel ease. So sometimes we can minimize something because we get to that perceived state of ease quicker. But as Brene Brown would say, choose courage over comfort. And what I feel is walk through the short-term discomfort to get to the long-term ease. And if you know and you're clear about how setting a healthier boundary starts to give you a greater sense of self, builds your sense of esteem, tells you who you are and why you're here, and starts to build that sense within yourself, you'll be more apt to want to follow through. And when you've identified that a relationship or a particular circumstance is a boundary issue, and you're wanting to speak with the person, you want to be clear, direct, and don't over-explain. Okay, so sometimes we feel the need to justify it. We don't need to do it. It's how you feel, and you don't need to justify how you feel. Boundaries are based on how you feel. And it is often important to explain the consequence. So let me give an example. So here's one. Dad, it's okay with me that we don't see eye to eye on all our decisions, but it's not okay to raise your voice at me in the process. If you want to continue to be involved in our Sunday night dinners, this has to stop. Okay? So, for example, if you were the person where this shows up in families sometimes because we're used to having improper boundaries, often that stem from childhood, and we feel overly responsible for the relationship we have with our parents often. So say you had a dad, or anyone for that matter, but let's just say I use the example of dad. You know, he doesn't agree with you. He oversteps his boundary, giving his opinion about how you live your life, maybe how you and your husband or your partner live your life. And maybe he raises his voice, and he does it at Sunday dinners. I might have some experience with this, okay? Legit. So, Dad, it's okay with me, if it is okay with you, it's okay with me that we don't see eye to eye on all our decisions. So I'm being clear. It's not okay to raise your voice at me in the process. That's the boundary. Here's the consequence. If you want to continue to be involved in our Sunday night dinners, this has to stop. Okay? So being clear, being direct, not over-explaining, and I'm giving a consequence. That's really important. I know, not easy, but that's kind of how it goes. So the other part of it is you want to focus. Where's my piece of paper? Here it is. You want to focus on yourself when you're setting a boundary. Okay? This is what that looks like. So you want to avoid saying something like, you have to stop bothering me when I'm working. Okay? So that's focusing on them. Instead, it works better often if you say, I need time to myself when I'm working so that I can focus on getting my work done. Okay, so that's a different form of communication when you're explaining a boundary. Let me say it again. When you focus on them, which isn't well received generally, you might say something like, you have to stop bothering me when I'm working. And you might know what I'm talking about because a lot of us are working at home right now. And instead, when you focus on yourself, when you're setting a boundary, you would say, I need time to myself when I'm working so that I can focus on getting my work done. And you may or may not need to also set a consequence when you say that. Okay, but that's one way to be able to get through it. Be able to language what you want to be languaging. And the other side of it is, it's one thing to say it, it's another thing to follow up and follow through as needed. Okay, and I know this takes practice. And I know at the beginning, when we're maybe not used to languaging this and being really clear with what we're doing, it might feel incredibly unnatural and awkward, and it might even make you feel, guilty or selfish. Here's the thing around that is it's okay to show up in a way that is clunky and so on. You don't need to be polished. And that's just the pressure that we place on ourselves. So right off the bat, I'd say just disarm that from yourself. To do your best to just disarm that, which means however you say it is exactly the way you're supposed to say it. I find when I know that there's a chronic issue with this and I've had a problem setting a boundary with somebody, that I will write it out for myself, right? Give myself some wording, short, sweet, to the point. And if I feel like I need to set a consequence, then I do. And I know that sounds awful, but you know what happens when you do that? You create a rewarding relationship, or you create a boundary on an unhealthy relationship, and that unhealthy relationship starts to move back from you and no longer harm you. And if you think chronically taking hits and jabs and energetic, you know what I'm talking about. If you think that that's not harm, it's harm. Okay? So be really clear, create the space for yourself to recognize. Look for signs of discomfort, stress, anxiety, resentment. Recognize that that can be an issue. Take a moment, ask yourself what you're feeling, why you're feeling it. Emotion does get in the way, for sure. Oftentimes emotion gets in the way when we have just let something go by for a long time. So if you're a person who, if you're a woman who feels like you haven't had a lot of experience with this, this is a perfect example where you might want to work with somebody. I work with a lot of my coaching clients on this. If this is a chronic issue for you, then working one-on-one with somebody can help you. If this is just something where you're like, right, now I remember what that is, I'm going to go about doing that, then you'll be able to probably create this in your life. But if you find that this shows up all over the place, you might need some extra mentorship or support on that. And I can help you with that. You can just go ahead and reach out to me. I know emotion gets in the way. Typically, emotion gets in the way when it's something that we have shelved over and over and over again. And then when we let a little bit out, what happens is the whole top blows off. When you get used to catching it closer to the moment, then that doesn't start to overtake the whole thing. Okay, so let me give you some examples. This is from the Recovery Education Network, and I wanted to share this with you. It comes from reframing beliefs. So a big part of my Reclaim Your Voice is identifying kind of some of our belief systems and then creating a healthy way of looking at it, reframing it in our mind. I am going to email this to you. I'm going to just pull out a couple of examples. It can be so helpful, okay? So an example of an unhealthy belief would be, I can never say no to others. Reframing that is, I have a right to say no to others if it is an invasion of my space or a violation of me. Okay? Unhealthy belief. It is my job to hold us together. A lot of people feel this in their families, whether it's extended family, even when there is an issue with boundaries. A healthier boundary builder would be, I have a right to take care of myself. If they want to stay together as a family or group, it is up to each individual to make such a decision. We all share responsibility to create the interdependency needed to keep us as a united group. Right? Another one. I can never tell where to draw the line with others. My last example. A healthier boundary builder would be, there is a line I have drawn over which I do not allow others to cross. This line ensures me my uniqueness, my autonomy, and my privacy. I am able to be me the way I really am, rather than the way people want me to be, by drawing this line. By this line, I let others know this is who I am and where I begin and where you start. Okay? So I think those are really some good examples of, and I will give you more because I know that there's a lot more that would pertain to the scope of everybody. And Lisa, I just want to give you some example of some boundary violations. So we talked about how it can be a boundary around our physical space, our physical body. It can be a boundary around our mental and emotional well-being. It can be around a boundary around time, space, material possessions, all sorts of things. So here's an example of an emotional issue. So in terms of like a boundary around our emotions, and this is it. This would be an example. You may not continue to yell at me. If you do, I will leave the room and end this meeting. So if you have an unhealthy boundary with a coworker or someone in your life that feels like they can just take the crap out on you and you feel like you have to take it, this would be an example. Quote, you may not continue to yell at me. If you do, I will leave the room and end this meeting. Okay? You make that your own, depending if it pertains to you. Here's one around time. Quote, I have a policy of not making snap decisions. I need time to think and reflect on what I want to do. If you need an immediate answer, it will be no. So here's one of the things that happens is that people want our time and energy. I don't mean like in a negative way. They just do. And we get used to wanting our way often. And some people are more like this than others. And for some of us, we feel like we need some space to make a decision, right? So we find ourselves saying chronically yes. This might be a way for you to create the space for you to show up with the answer that you really do want to give. So it's that place where, if it's, not if it's okay with you, but I just make a policy of kind of just reflecting on things. I'm going to go ahead and respond to you tonight if that's fine with you, or whatever. I know that might not be the most direct way, but it might work in some circumstances, depending on the person that you're communicating with. So for other people, it might be as simple as, I have a policy of not making snap decisions. I need time to think and reflect on what I want to do. I'll get back to you, could be one. I'll get back to you by tomorrow or whatever. Make sure you get back to the person. Or in this case, the consequence was, if you need an immediate answer, it will be no. Okay, 3 more. Criticism. It's not okay with me for you to make comments about my weight. Please stop. If you don't, I won't be able to continue the conversation. Now, I didn't write that one, but it is amazing what we allow into our space. And we shelve it and we don't think it's okay, but we make it okay. We all know it's not okay to make comments about people's weights. Not only is it not okay, it's just, it's horrible. I don't know what it is about society, not we, but society feels like they need to comment on when we're a low weight, when we're a higher weight, when we're a pregnant weight, when we're a whatever weight. We all know that it doesn't feel good, and yet we kind of allow it to happen. You know what I'm noticing lately? The number of times sometimes people call me a guy. Now, this is offside here, but I will go somewhere with girls and people call us guys. And I always think to myself now, why is it that I accept that? People would never walk up to a group of men sitting at a table and go, hey girls, how's it going? Now you could look back and go, wow, you're sensitive. Yeah, maybe. It doesn't matter, it's how I feel. And I've gotten to the point now where I'm like, sometimes I say something. If it feels right to me, no, I'm not a jerk about it. And I don't make a consequence like, if you don't stop calling me a guy, I'm gonna leave right now. That's not what I mean. But it's the thing where you collect things. It's like they're minor violations, but for some of us, they're major violations. And it might not be being called a guy, but it's a weird one. And I wonder where we ever got into a society where we call women men. I just think it's strange. So criticism, it's not okay for you to make comments about my weight. Stop. How about that one? Extra commitments. Although this is an important issue to me, I must decline your request for my help at this time. It's okay to say no. It's really okay. When you say no to something that isn't in alignment with who you are or where you are, for whatever reason, know that if intuitively you have the desire to say no, that you are honoring your needs, which is incredibly important and allows you the space and the latitude to say yes to the thing that is waiting for your yes. And when you listen to that over and over and over, you create continual alignment in your life. And now you stop energy going all over the place. And because everything starts pointing in the same direction, you stop the leaking of energy and you start the funneling of energy. And now you can show up in your life in a bigger way, the way that's most in line with who you are, to create the impact that you want in the world, to honor yourself in the way that you can also honor other people. Okay? So I know there are more to this. I will say this, because we are, an hour and 15 minutes into this, I want to wrap up the discussion. I wanted to give you more time to go into breakout rooms. I apologize for that. I'm trying to match the time with the information. I do know that this is a continuing conversation. So if you have not joined my private Facebook group, I know for some of us, we're like, I don't want to be in a private Facebook group. I understand. But if you're in the private Facebook group, this is a place for us to continue the conversation. I want to let you know that the next meeting that we have is on Tuesday, August 11th. I have not set the topic. I would love to hear what the topic would be for your desire. I also want to let you know that Reclaim Your Voice, the 21-day program, is all about boundaries, aligning your life, speaking to your absolute truth in a way that you have more confidence and courage and conviction. It is not a public speaking course. It is literally a self-honoring course, okay? So I'm doing it in an upgraded format coming forward. Registration is going to open on July 27th. If you are in our private group, I'm going to have a discount code. I so thank you for being on here today. I know that we all have incredible shall I say, demands on our time and our energy. I know this is a much more complicated topic than we've even talked about tonight, but I hope it's given you a level of reflection and, giving you some impetus to be able to kind of address this for yourself. So I'm going to stay in the chat room for a couple minutes. If you have any questions, please just let me know. And then I'm going to hop on over to the Facebook page for a couple minutes. And I thank you and I honor you. Thank you so much, everybody, for giving of your time and energy tonight. And I will see you all.